Hello guys, welcome to another Rewind review. Well, since this is the review that we're going to be doing today, there's only one way that I can start this video, and that is by simply saying, well, it's Groundhog Day. Again. Released in 1993, Groundhog Day sees Bill Murray playing a narcissistic, self-centered weatherman finding himself in a time loop on Groundhog Day, and the day keeps repeating until he gets it right and becomes a better person. The movie was written by Danny Rubin and Harold Ramis, who also directs, and starring alongside Bill Murray is Andy McDowell, Chris Elliott, Stephen Tobolowsky, Brian Doyle Murray, Marita Geraghty, Angela Patton, Rick DeCommon, Rick Overton and Robin Duke. Groundhog Day is one of those icon movies. This is one of those films that everyone will always tell you to watch. This is one of the most iconic movies to ever come from the 90s. This is also one of those movies that had a big influence on several movies that have come out over the years, with some of the more iconic ones being things like Happy Death Day 1 and 2, as well as Edge of Tomorrow. I'm not sure if there were movies prior to this that did deal with a similar premise, but for all intents and purposes, this is the one that really sort of brought it to the forefront, to the point where most people will know the time loop scenario from this movie. This film has a very simple premise, it has a very simple plot, and it is all the better for it. It doesn't try to complicate things too much. It completely focuses on Bill Murray's character, who is having to relive the same day again and again and again and again and again. There is absolutely no reason for it whatsoever, and it's one of those things where you will question it because there isn't an answer for it. They don't bring up why it's happened or how it's happened or anything like that, but you don't really focus on it really, because the mystery for this movie is not the focus of the story. The focus of this story is about this character getting better, and having Bill Murray being the lead character in this is the perfect choice for this role. He is brilliant as this character. It would be really easy for this character to be very unlikable when you first introduced him because of how self-centered he is, but the way that Bill Murray portrays it, the way the character is written, you do at least want to see him get better across the course of this movie, and you are invested in what's going on with him. And with the style of comedy that they've gone for with this film as well, Bill Murray really does lend himself to that style of comedy. He does have this very dry wit to him, and it really does benefit and add something to this film. This is a comedy and it is pitched as a comedy, but there is definitely a lot of other elements in this as well. There is a lot of drama, there's a lot of romance as well, but this is more sold as a comedy, to the point where most people will normally see this as a comedy. For me personally, I don't think this is an absolutely hysterical movie, but when the comedy does kick into gear, it can get really funny, and a lot of that does come from Bill Murray's character when he does find out what's going on with him, and he does start seeing all these little things that are happening again and again, and seeing how the people around him are reacting to it, because he seems to be acting so strange because he sort of knows things are going to happen. So yes, this is a funny movie. It is definitely intended to be a comedy, but I don't necessarily think that it is absolutely hilarious. Hello guys, welcome to another Rewind review. Well, since this is the film that we're doing a review today, hang on a sec. What, you don't know this bit? Oh no, please don't tell me I've got to do all that again. Alright, I'm just going to have to continue from where it is that I was. I'm sorry if this is a little bit confusing, but I really hope that the first bit of this video was actually recorded, so I'm just going to continue from where it was that I left off, and hopefully that bit's still intact. So, since this movie is primarily focused on Bill Murray's character and the struggles that he's going through in order to get better, it does mean that a lot of the other characters who get introduced into this, we don't get an awful lot from. We don't really get to see too much about them. The most that we really see from any of them is Andy McDowell's character, and I think that the performance here that she gives is really good. I do think that there is a nice enough chemistry between her and Bill Murray. I do like her scenes with Bill Murray. I do think that the romance is handled well overall. I do think that it is fairly good, but I'm a little bit split on it overall, because I do think that a lot of people do kind of forget that this is meant to be just one day, so it's just Bill Murray who remembers all this stuff. It is fine overall, and since it is all through Phil's perspective, how it fits into the narrative does work overall, but I do feel like it is still just a tiny bit rushed. But when it comes to the premise of this movie, of this character having to relive the same events again and again and again, they take full advantage of this premise. I love how it slowly builds up over time, how he just starts to kind of click what's going on. That's where his performance, where Bill Murray's performance really does excel, because he does sell the believability of this. It's paced out so well, and it really does take just enough time to get going. And I love the way that he's sort of confused but kind of amused by it at the same time when this first happens. And I love how it does escalate. There is a really great build up across time with how this is basically like a full-on breakdown for him, and I really love how that is paced out. That slow realisation really does work, and I love all the little opportunities that he has to either tell someone, bring it up, or try and figure out what's going on, to the point where he even goes and sees a doctor at one point. And I completely forgot that that was Harold Ramis, so I was a bit surprised seeing him in this. I've got to be honest, when it comes to Harold Ramis, I am so much more familiar with him as Egon more than anything else, so when he showed up in this and he hasn't got his glasses on, he just looks so different. I just didn't recognise him. And as the film escalates from that point on, you start seeing him realise that there's absolutely no consequences to what's going on. He starts trying to kill himself, tries to see what it is that he can actually do and get away with. He tries getting sent to prison and then still wakes up in his bed the next morning. It really does take full advantage of this story. Every single possibility that you can possibly think of is in this. And it would be really easy for this movie to feel very repetitive, and there are definitely sequences where they do use it a lot throughout the film, but there is enough variety in each of these sequences to keep you interested, because there are scenes later on in the movie that they didn't show earlier on, but it establishes it as something that he has done a lot or has interacted with a lot, so it does make sense. Now, I've mentioned him having a bit of a breakdown. I've also mentioned that there is a lot of drama in this movie, and the one thing that I really do appreciate in this movie is that they don't keep it as light as it sounds. Like, this movie can get very dark. It does try to maintain a lighter tone as possible. Some of the moments are quite funny, but they are very darkly funny. Like that sequence where Phil does get completely fed up with what's going on, so he does try offing himself several times. You see him like driving off a cliff, you see him jumping off a building, you see him jumping in front of cars, you see him dumping a toaster in his bath. It's a family movie, this one. There are quite a few sequences like this, and I've got to be honest, I've got to mention the stunt work in this movie, because some of the stuff that they do in this are really good, especially some of the car chases and the high jumps and everything. They're really great, and I do think that the stunt work is worth some praise. But even though those sequences are definitely more geared towards comedy rather than being dark and dramatic, there is one sequence in this movie, one montage, that is genuinely really sad. It is really powerful, it is expertly handled, and it involves this homeless guy that Phil keeps passing every single day, and he's just like always checks his pocket like, oh, I haven't got anything, and then he just keeps going. But there's one day where he actually does go back and he does talk to the guy and he does start trying to help him out, but the stuff that happens with the two of them and everything that they go through, it is really powerful, and I really love that sequence. I love how dramatic these sequences are able to be, how those scenes are paced out, how the acting from both of them, especially Bill Murray, is in those sequences. They're brilliant, and I really do appreciate them being in this movie. That's why I'm saying that this takes full advantage of the premise of this film, because there are definitely going to be things that he cannot change, that he cannot alter whatsoever. And it's through the interactions with him that has a big impact on who he does slowly start becoming, and I really do like where that sequence is positioned in the movie to move the character arc. Some movies do feel the need to include sequences like this just for the sake of including them, but I really do appreciate how this stuff is included in this movie, and it does feel very natural and very real, and I really do like it. It really does ground this movie a lot more, and it gives it so much more weight behind it as well. That's why when I say that this movie is a comedy first, and I feel like it could have been funnier, isn't a bad thing at all, because you wouldn't be able to have moments like this and have it still work. It's able to maintain a tonal balance really well, and I really do appreciate how each of these sequences are handled and how nothing feels out of place whatsoever. That being said, this is one of those movies that does rely an awful lot on continuity and making sure that the continuity is as spot on as possible, and there are a few little errors here and there, but they're barely noticeable. They will not take you out of the movie whatsoever. It's more just the timings more than anything else, because there's a scene where Phil gets up one morning and he just rushes out of the house and he goes down the street and everything, but he still interacts with everyone that he would interact with if he was just going at his normal pace, so he shouldn't have bumped into them then. But that is me just thinking a bit too hard into this, because when it comes to the overall story and how this all knits together, it really does work, and honestly, it won't bother you whatsoever. And one thing that I do appreciate when it comes to the continuity of this movie is the way that the film is edited and the way that it's shot, because there are a lot of sequences where they use the exact same shots over and over again. Sometimes it is the exact same sequence that they just repeat playing, but most things else they just try to repeat it as accurately as possible with the way that just people are moving, with the way that the camera moves, stuff going on in the background, things like that. Everything does feel very genuine, and I like how they do try and keep it as consistent as possible, because it really does help emphasize and drive home that this is the exact same stuff happening again and again and again. So honestly, those little moments here and there, honestly, they won't bother you. You probably won't even notice them. When it comes to the soundtrack by George Fenton, I think overall it is a fairly decent soundtrack. I do think that it does work very well within this movie. It's got this sort of cheery sort of tone to it. There is a bit of a jazzy kind of influence here and there. The songs that are used throughout, especially that one, Every Time Bill Murray Gets Up, every single song that they choose is very suitable, and they really do work for this film. It's not the most memorable soundtrack. It doesn't really stand out as much as I feel like it really could do, but I do appreciate what it does add to this movie, especially when Phil is up and he's going around and all the same things are happening again, that the music does become a little bit disorienting, and it really does help emphasise how it is that he's feeling. So I do like how the soundtrack is used. It just, to me, is not that memorable, but I do like it overall, and it does suit this movie. Hello guys, welcome to another Rewind review. Well, since this is the film that we're doing today, oh come on! Please don't make me do this all again. Look, guys, I'm going to have to just jump straight into my overall thoughts for this video. Hopefully, if this review ends, I'll be out of this time loop. So, overall, outside of a few nitpicks, this is genuinely a great movie with a fantastic story. I love the premise, I love how it's told, I love that it stays simple. It completely focuses on the most important thing, and that is the character arc that Phil is going through, and it's able to tell that story in a really, really unique way. I think it's really well cast. I like the editing, I like the camera work, the music, the stunt work, the humour, the romance, the tone and pacing. This is a genuinely great, heartwarming, influential movie that I genuinely think everyone needs to see at least once. So with all that being said, my rating for Groundhog Day is a 9 out of 10. This was very nearly a 10 out of 10 for me. There's just a few little things that I just needed to address. But honestly, it is genuinely a fantastic movie. I think that if you are a fan of Harold Ramis, if you're a fan of Bill Murray, if you're a fan of comedies, if you're a fan of 90s movies, I genuinely highly recommend you check it out. This is a PG movie, and honestly, if you have kids, if you have families, this is must-see family viewing. I highly recommend checking it out if you've never seen it before. And if you are somebody who has seen things like Happy Death Day 1 and 2 and Edge of Tomorrow, I highly recommend checking this movie out just to see how much influence this movie has. This is genuinely a great movie, and I really had fun revisiting it. Well, that is pretty much it for today's episode, so thank you so much for watching. As always, if you enjoy this content, please like, please subscribe, hit the notification button to keep up to date on everything that's going on here. If you've seen the movie at all, let me know down in the comments what you think about it. Also, if you have any suggestions for any future rewinds you'd like me to do, whether it's TV, movie, games, let me know down in the comments and I will try and get around to them. Thank you once again for watching, and I'm genuinely hoping that this is the end of the time loop. If it is, I'll see you next time on Rewind Reviews. See you guys. Hello guys, welcome to another Rewind review. Well, since this is the film that we're doing today